Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Shape the System. We're talking to Lottie DL, which is amazing because it's not spelled anything like that. I just found that out 14 seconds ago. It has about five silent letters.
Yeah, you're right, 5 silent letters. I would be surprised if you got it right on the first go.
Has anyone got it right on the first go?
There's actually an old detective show called DL and Pasco, and it's spelled the same way. So any fans of that will then pronounce it properly, but everybody else is just lost.
Brilliant. I mean, normally we go straight into the problem. I want to understand where this name comes from, just while we're here.
It's actually Scottish. Very strange. I don't know why they decided to think of a name with 5 silent letters, but when my family migrated to Australia, half of them were like, screw this, we're going to become Dalziels. And then my stubborn half were like, we're going to keep it and we're going to keep on pronouncing it like this. So here we are.
Oh my God, that must make for an amazing customs check-in, or any time you go to a country or a nightclub or anything that involves having to pronounce and respond to your name. All right, we will dive in. Now, you're from Banish, or you run Banish, or you set up Banish, all of the Banish things, which is fun. There's a whole bunch of parts of this that we're going to talk about. I want to start firstly, as I always want to do, with the problem itself. And, you know, this is all sitting under an arc of sustainability, but I want to dive into the specific parts of an individual, I guess, in a commerce-driven society being sustainable that Banish and yourself are really, really focused on. Let's talk about the problems.
Yeah, so the main problem that we're trying to fix is the lack of education around how to live more sustainably for the everyday Australian. Like so many founders, when I first started, I was the target market. I was that person who was trying to make small changes in my life to live more sustainably. And I couldn't find any credible information out there on how to do just that. Right. I was a journalist at the time, so I kind of thought, well, hang on, why is nobody talking about this? Why is no one making it easier for the everyday person to do just that, just to live a little bit more sustainably? So that was kind of how I came across the problem. And then when I started making the sustainable switches and doing the hours worth of research, I would purchase a product from what I thought was a sustainable company. And for example, the first product that I purchased was stainless steel straws, and they came individually wrapped in plastic. And I went, well, what is going on? Like, I've just spent 5 hours researching what the best type of reusable straw is. I've purchased from what I thought was a sustainable company, and it's come individually wrapped in plastic. And for the everyday person, that is just throw in the towel, let's just give up and not try. And I completely agreed with them. I was going, this is horrible. But instead of being overwhelmed and disheartened, I saw the opportunity to educate people on how to live more sustainably, but to also connect them with the brands who were doing the right thing, who were living and breathing sustainability, but didn't have access to mass audiences.
Right. I want to come back to something you said before, just around journalism. When you were in journalism, you said it was hard to do the research and hard to find this out. And I think you might have said no one was really sort of covering that or talking about that. Why not? Like, if we're so attuned now, like greenwashing is a thing. It's not that everyone's not talking about sustainability, but no, like this particular part of the issue. Like, talk me through that part of why you think the establishment wasn't talking about this stuff, or that was the nature of it.
Yeah, so when I was doing my research into it, there was information available on greenwashing at a very high level, or about clean energy or coal and things like that. But when it came to the everyday person taking action, there wasn't information out there. It was kind of like you can read all of the doom and gloom about the Australian Great Barrier Reef and what have you. But when it came to, okay, let's act, it was like, oh, well, reduce your carbon footprint.
Right. Good. Just go do that.
Yeah. Good luck.
It's interesting because I think, if you go to like the money section of any major publication, there's always, these are the 5 things you can do to do the X thing. And so we're kind of conditioned to know how to solve the problem for yourself in other verticals. But no, as to your point, no one writes an article and says these are the 7 things that you could do that would have this impact. Is it because no one's researched on the topic, or people aren't prepared to take a stand with it, or it doesn't agree with the fact that they're an organisation that needs to sell stuff? Like what's causing the challenge?
Yeah, I think this was 4 years ago, and I think the industry's changed quite significantly since then.
Right.
But I think what it was is there was this whole kind of segment of people who lived and breathed this, who had always been living sustainably, who'd never used plastic, who had a glass jar for their whole family's worth of waste for a year.
Right.
But the everyday consumer wasn't really that target. It was just kind of like, let's just talk to these highly engaged people and and they'll make changes and they'll do everything. And it was almost like, I don't know, I think it was almost inaccessible for the everyday person because they couldn't aspire to that level. They couldn't become that person with a glass jar filled with waste. So when I was a journalist, I was in the health and fitness industry. So what I realized was there was so many similarities between health and fitness and also with sustainability in the aspect of you wouldn't sign up for a marathon, quit sugar, start a new diet and decide to be a bodybuilder one day because it wouldn't work. You would fall off the bandwagon. And I feel like the same's with sustainability. You're not going to just wake up one morning and say, hey, I've decided I'm going to become a sustainable person and I'm never going to eat meat again. I'm never driving my car. I'm going to never, ever consume plastic. It's all about making those simple, small changes. And that's what I wanted to find as a consumer, but I couldn't find that information.
Okay, so there's kind of an incremental behaviour change that has to happen over time, and you kind of have to meet people where they are. And so understanding now that that's sort of the problem that you start with, it doesn't, like if I go to the Banish website, for example, it appears as a store that will allow me to buy things that are sustainable. How, like you talked before about part of the challenge is behavioural, but part of it is actually knowing what, if you do need to buy something, how to buy the thing that aligns to what thing you're trying to do. But it feels like how are those things interpolated? I guess and I guess there's a related question, which is so much of what I'm guessing want people to do or espousing is to actually consume less, but you're also combining that with something which says, if you need to buy it, at least buy it from here. I really want to sort of narrow in on this because I know it must be a challenge.
Yeah, it definitely is, especially when it comes to things like we're preparing for Black Friday and Cyber Monday and everything like that. And you've got a really difficult moral choice between selling things to people when ultimately what we want is for people to consume less.
Right.
And it's something that I grappled with at the start. But the reason why, for example, we participate in sales is because it helps make sustainability more accessible to larger audiences. It helps them to make those switches. And also, our target audience isn't the person who has a jar of waste and is going to just consume nothing for the rest of their life. There's somebody who is going to wash their hair with a shampoo bar. They're going to use a sustainable razor, but they're also going to need to buy those razor blades. So that's kind of how we position it. It's in the fact that there's over 500 products on there. And whilst people are going to need to consume something at some point, we would like them to purchase from us.
Yeah. And then just in terms of the behaviour change itself, because I think there's a few other parts that I want to get to a bit later on, but I'm just part of this behaviour change is challenging, right? And the reason I mentioned the personal finance one, I spent a bunch of time trying to improve people's financial decision making. And the kind of the observation we had there, and I don't know if the parallel works here, is that there's a portion of people who actively want to change and they need tools to help them change. And the behaviour change is already, it's already in them. You're just giving them the pathway and the way forward and the kind of the knowledge and the insight. But there's a bunch of people for whom they want the outcome of the change. They want to be better off financially in this example. But they're actually not prepared to do the behaviour change, or it's very difficult to get them to do the behaviour change. And quite often you need to take the responsibility away from them and do the thing. So you give me the money and I'll do the behaviour change for you and you'll be better off and just don't need to worry about it. Is that part of kind of what you see here as well in this push towards sustainability?
Honestly, not really from our community and our audience. They are people who are kind of dipping their toes in. They want to find out more. They want to start. They're curious, I would say, on how sustainability works, how sustainable living, what it would look like for them. And then they will maybe be following us on social media for a couple of months before they then start to make those changes. So it's not really like we are going to absolutely everybody and saying, you need to recycle, right? You need to compost, you need to reduce your waste. Here's how it is. We've kind of got that warm audience, I would say, who are interested in it first.
Yeah, they're already primed for it. I guess the thing I was sort of more understanding was that, like in the financial services example, if you take 100 people, somewhere between 5 and 10 are actively trying to track their money and they need tools. 90% of people want to be better off financially but aren't prepared to do that. And there is a solution for that 90%, and someone has to build it, because if you only get the 10%, the other 90% will far outweigh the 10%, especially in a macro that, like my finances and your finances aren't connected, but our environmental impact absolutely is. Is there part of the thinking here, which is let's build something that works for the 10% or 20, or I don't know what it is, and then ultimately work out how to move the needle on everyone, or that's the bridge too far? Like, how do you think about the macro?
I think about the macro in the fact that currently we're really fortunate that there's a lot of discussion happening about sustainability. And especially I think COVID has been a really good thing for the sustainability industry, because we have been privy to the amount of waste that we create as an individual, where we used to, throw rubbish out at school, throw rubbish out in the office and things like that. So you wouldn't actually see the amount of waste that you as a household created.
I'm just going to read between the lines here. Because we're at home, we're seeing all of our own waste. Is that what you're going
Literally. I'm like, you're seeing.
That's what you were mentioning. I'm like, I think that's...
Yeah, so that's it. So I think then you've kind of joined with, Australia. The Australians feel the effects of climate change more than anybody else. We have bushfires, we have floods, we have everything. So you've got all of these different external factors happening. And then I think people are now starting to go, okay, well, Queensland is banning single-use plastic. It's time to make a swap. It's starting to happen. So I think the way that we look at converting that 90% audience is through education, because they're looking to learn. They're looking to understand how it works. And then we'll look to convert them to that 10 to 15% who are eager to completely transform their life.
Yeah. And then the part of what you can do is consume sustainably, and we'll talk about what that actually even means, because I think there's a lot of ways to interpret that. But some of them are things that might be able to, I guess, I'm trying to avoid the word offset, but I can't think of a better word for it, where there's services that you can use to offset the thing that you haven't yet, reduced, if you like. So I think of my own personal situation, right? I'm subscribed to a service called Ecology. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Ecology with an I. And it's basically carbon offset, right? And so I still drive a vehicle. I live in a place where I need a vehicle. It's hard for me to not have a vehicle where I currently live, and I don't fly at the moment, but I probably will again, and a few other things. Do you see yourselves as playing in those types of services as well as the sale of actual goods? And how what's the interplay between what you consume and then what you offset, and how do you think about all that?
Yeah, honestly, what we focus on at Banish is mainly consumption and waste. Yeah. That's really the area that we're sticking in, because as you say, sustainability means so many different things, and it can look so different for so many people, but kind of the niche that we're focusing on is personal waste.
Right. Okay, understood. Yeah, just the part of the reason I brought it up was I'm in a situation where I make ends meet every month. I'm not, completely flush, but I'm also not like penny pinching necessarily. But the cost to buy a service like that then would offset everything that I'm not yet doing as well as I would like to be or could be, is relatively small, but it's like $10 a month or $12 a month or something. And yet even for myself, who's fully enthused, right, I run a podcast talking about this kind of stuff, I'm still like, $12 a month. And I'm trying to work out where people who do want to do the right thing have to put these kinds of decisions in terms of, would I pay $20 for something that's far more sustainable than the thing that's $14? And I guess that's part of your challenge in trying to move people to better products and better quality stuff, is a big part of it trying to get them to understand the true cost of the thing they're buying, or you're having to try and do life cycle analysis of, look, if you buy that product, it'll only last half as long, so it's actually costing you twice as much, or...
It's definitely that life cycle analysis, because a thing like a metal safety razor, for example, is $42,
right,
which is far more expensive than your disposable razors that you get at your local supermarket. But that razor is something that you will have for upwards of kind of 50 years. Somebody's grandmother gave her safety razor in her will. Like, it is amazing. They last forever. So that's kind of, it's more the cost per use that you're looking at then.
Right.
So then it makes economical sense, but you have to be in that financial position to be able to spend $42 on a razor to start with.
Yeah. And is that a big part of it for a lot of these products, which is if you buy better, these things will last longer and your utility over time is going to be much better?
Exactly.
That's usually the angle. It's durability.
And quality as well, and environmental impact. It's kind of, you're asking those questions of where is it ultimately going to end up?
Yeah.
So if you're going to buy, say, for example, a bottle of shampoo, it's one thing to look at the cost of the actual, like, of the product that you're going to be using on your hair, but it's also like, what is the environmental cost of that plastic bottle at the end of the life?
Yeah. I guess just coming back to, though, I don't want to throw any brands under the bus, but I'm like the rest of the humanity at some point, well, not humanity, but certainly a certain portion of humanity has bought a pair of Allbirds shoes on the basis that these things are very sustainable. Mine didn't last more than 9 months, and I think the product's amazing, right? And I like the brand and I like the material innovation, but it helps them if I buy a product from them every 9 months. I'd love a pair of shoes that's like my Aaron Williams that have lasted me for 20 years. And I'm trying to understand how brands sort of lean into that, and then also, like, if you had to make a choice that was sustainable, hence the subjectivity of it, the things that last longer are probably going to be more sustainable than things that are made with nice materials, or is this, how do you think about the trade-off in these two things?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's a really tough kind of conundrum that people are in, and everybody's in it. So one of the main kind of selling points for a supplier coming on board with Banish, for example, is the fact that we have this connection and this amazing community who have a connection with Banish. So say, for example, if you are the razor brand, you only are going to really sell once to a customer, because then there's no need for them to come back, in theory. So they don't need to sign up to your mailing list, follow you on social media, or do anything like that. But if they were to have a great relationship with Banish, they have a great experience with Banish by purchasing this razor, then when they go to make a swap to, say, for example, a beeswax wrap, then they'll come to Banish, and then they might leave with a shampoo bar as well. So that's kind of the sell for a brand to get involved with Banish. But for the consumer, they're trusting us as a brand to have done the research into the fact that this shampoo bar will last you X amount of time, or this razor is of a really high quality in comparison to a lot of brands that are out there that will probably last you between a year and 18 months if you're lucky.
Yeah. I think I hate putting kind of labels and pigeonholing things, but it feels to me like it's like a sustainable choice, if that makes sense. Where you're actually trying to say, here's a whole bunch of products and services, and your value is not just how well do they work, but how well do they line up to my values. How do you test for that? And in terms of the product?
Yeah, it's really difficult. Our onboarding process is very intense. We can't do it year round because it is so intense and heavy for the products. Yeah, so we do them once a quarter because it's just so hard to vet and understand exactly how sustainable a company is, because in Australia there is no regulation. Everybody can throw, you could grab, I don't know, a piece of chewing gum which is hideously unsustainable and put on the front of it eco-friendly, and nobody's going to even check. You can just pop it straight on the shelf. That's how insane it is that the industry has no regulation. So it's kind of up to us as a brand to create that regulation. So we've got a list called the Banish Sin Bin, which is ingredients that we don't agree with. So things like palm oil, parabens, oxybenzone, which is an ingredient found in sunscreen, all of these different ones we've had to independently create
Right.
So then when we get suppliers on board, for example, we're checking what products they've got, what ingredients they have, We're checking kind of where their products are made, who makes them, all of this intense stuff. But there's no like easy, like yes or no. To start with, we had you have to be fair trade certified to be on Banish.
Right.
And I had so many suppliers come up against this because they said, look, I can't become a fair trade certified company because I don't have enough turnover right now. But here's a picture of me hand knitting organic cotton into dishcloths from my living room. So it's kind of, you have to weigh up that perspective and kind of go, well, how can this person or this business reach that level where they can get certification to have that turnover?
Yeah.
But it's an absolute minefield.
Yeah. I actually think though, we talk quite often on the show about the fact that often you have to change the regulation, right? Or you bring in the regulation. I think we spoke to Olympia Yager, who's from doTERRA, about insect protein. And she's like, we can't feed it to ruminants, which are people with multiple stomachs, well, not people, but animals with multiple stomachs, because the regulations sort of say this over here and we kind of have to just go with that. There's no real reason we can't do that. I think I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but the opportunity to either act as the form of regulation and self-regulation to say, well, it doesn't exist, but we want it to be done properly, so here's the science and the method we're putting behind it. Or we actually need to go to regulators and get them to change it. Because just speaking of sunscreen, I was talking to someone who has a sunscreen brand recently. It hasn't come out yet on the show, but and they were talking about how they have to put it in virgin plastic. They're not able to put it in recycled plastic because it's a health product, not a product that you would have washing up detergent, and therefore it needs to be in plastic that's never been touched before. You're like, really? That feels like I think anyone who has sunscreen would probably be okay with it being in recycled plastic. Not sure.
Exactly. Whereas like one of the brands that we have that is a sunscreen brand now is packaged in tin.
Right.
So it's virgin tin.
Right.
So, but it means that it can be infinitely recycled in Australia.
So I think the first person has to have it in the virgin one, but from then on, it's fine.
It's just
you probably should have the show on virgin materials used in the light. Have you ever had a thought to when you look at a category and go, "There's no one doing a good job in a category," or is there always a good brand in a category that you're looking at?
Yeah, so I've started a brand on Banish called Little Pepino, which focuses on kitchen products because I was a gap in that market and I couldn't find people.
What's a kitchen product?
Sustainable kitchen products, like everything from reusable baking mats, for example, to bamboo dish brushes and things like that. But you come up against this kind of moral dilemma, and it's been a really good journey for me starting that brand is things like I would love to have the label of Australian made, but for example, silicone, there's no one who produces silicone in Australia.
Right.
So it's things like that I would never have known, and I would have gone on my high horse, and that's what a lot of consumers do these days. Like, I only will buy Australian made. It's going, well, good luck. You will never be able to use anything with silicone.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think I like the patriotic angle to it, but often in the system, it actually doesn't solve the problem. It's a limiting factor, and it's somewhat, it's cutting your nose to spite your face, in my opinion. But I'm not sure. I don't have all the data to be able to back that up. But yeah, humans are fundamentally agents of trade, right? And we do better when we actually engage in trade. And I have this thing that I do it better than you do, and so we should swap and share ideas as well. I want to get out of the kind of the purchasing part and get back to the behaviour part. You sort of started there, and there was a worksheet that I found in some of my research. It's more than a worksheet. It's like a whole workbook on how to live sustainably. I think it's a digital guide, though. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
But it says I can't buy it. It says it's unavailable. What have I done wrong?
No, you haven't done anything wrong. But what's happened is, so we launched that in July last year. Okay. And as the sustainability area changes and develops, we need to redo it. We need to update it. We need to make it more relevant. So that's why we've currently pulled it from sale, so that we can then launch it in a couple of weeks' time with more up-to-date, with more relevant information. It was kind of designed at the start of COVID, so it hadn't really hit yet. The kind of approach to sustainability, I think, has changed quite significantly. Also, the recycling industry changes every week. there is a new material on board from a brand has created, I don't know, a new type of packaging. So there needs to be a new solution for it. Or councils are changing who they recycle with. So then some materials aren't accepted or some materials are accepted now. So we're just simply updating it at the moment.
And yeah, I mean, I guess that was my curiosity was kind of 2 levels deep. I'm sure you had the reasons for turning it off, but I was more curious as to if there's a reason under that. Like, what's I would have thought a lot of these things were kind of fundamental truths, but it sounds like it's a bit of a moving target. Being able to take behaviour change that will then make it more sustainable. This thing used to be sustainable, but it isn't anymore. Like, is that what's happening, or is it policies and brands and stuff that are evolving? Is that what you're saying?
It's more that there's more information that I want to share, really.
Right.
That's what it comes down to is I think the consumer is becoming more educated. So the education materials that we put out there needs to have a different level of complexity to it.
Yeah. It kind of, and it's probably a bit tangential, but it kind of begs the question is why make it a document? Maybe it should be a subscription. You know?
Yes. Yeah, there's another kind of whole element that I'm looking into, which is creating a different platform purely for recycling. And everybody is kicking and screaming, saying, make it an app, which would be a lot easier. But financially, it's a really difficult one to spend that kind of money to develop an app.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different ballgame. But I think that maybe there's a misunderstanding that there is incremental behaviour change for one. We talked to Lily Dempster over at One Small Step maybe a year ago, and a lot of kind of, you know, parallels in terms of small incremental behaviour change that people are doing over time, and they're doing nothing other than building an app. Like you kind of have to be kind of focused in what you're doing. Now, not to suggest that you're not focused, but there's the product side, there's the workbook side, but then there's also this recycling program, which I would really love to have a bit of a chat about because it sort of leans on something that we've seen a few times, which is recycling isn't recycling. A lot of people think they're doing the right thing, and we go into it with the best of intentions, or what we've been told to do, or what we believe we've been told to do, and the actual reality is not happening. Can we talk a little bit about the problems in recycling in Australia, and then perhaps part of how Brad, got that right, Brad?
Yeah, so BRAD stands for the Banish Recycling and Disposal Program. So that's why it's called BRAD. But the problems with the Australian recycling industry are firstly the lack of trust from the consumer is is the biggest issue. It's the elephant in the room, is that no one believes that when they pop something into their recycling bin that it is actually being recycled.
And is it being recycled?
It depends on what the product is. It
or whether you've washed it properly.
That too. But I think there's a couple of different issues. So the issues that I come up against as an educator in this space is the fact that every single local council has a different recycling system.
Right.
So I can't come into your house and say, well, Vincent, because I recycle my milk bottles in my local council area in Waverley, that you can do the same there. So it's up to then local councils to provide that information on how to recycle properly and what can and can't go in the right bin. But there's a distrust in the industry because we were sending so much of it offshore. Traditionally, we were sending so much plastic overseas that we were then seeing footage of it being burnt, it strewn down rivers, it being placed into fields and nothing really happening with it. So that was why the export ban came into play a couple of years ago, which now forces Australians or the Australian recycling industry to recycle onshore. They're now no longer able to export the types of plastic that, in terms of kind of the industry, were seen as a low commodity and were a low value, and that's why they were sent offshore. So the whole thing with recycling is it's a financial industry. There is value in each and every product, but just how much value determines how likely it is to be recycled. Yeah. So, for example, like tin and aluminium is infinitely recyclable, and in Australia we're really good at recycling it. Whereas you look at something like plastic and there's 7 different types of plastic, and which type of plastic is it? And is the lid on a product different to the base of the the product. And is it big in size? Have you cleaned it properly? Is it, I don't know, what type of color is it? There's so many different variables that the chances of it getting to a recycling facility there's a lot more hoops that it has to jump through.
Got it. And so just some terminology here. The recycling facility isn't the thing that your yellow bin gets emptied into. That's like 3 steps further down. Because it gets picked up in the yellow bin, goes to some sorting centre that then ends up in some actual facility that says, I can do something with this raw material and I'm prepared to buy it at a certain cost because I'm going to sell it at Y cost as a newly made material.
Exactly.
I guess the reason why I'm sort of asking this, and I want to get on to Brad in just a second, but is our gap in recycling as a society one of behaviour or one of the systems to deal with the recycled goods just are still pretty finicky, are still pretty hard to navigate?
I think it's both. I think that there is, I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but
no skin in the game. I'm happy with all the answers.
Well, there are things happening. I'm so optimistic at talking of two different people in the recycling industry because there is so much innovation and change happening in it. But what the consumer sees is barely anything. They see the confusing side of it. They see that I don't even know where my rubbish goes, or I live in an apartment building and I go downstairs and the recycling bin is filled with normal rubbish. Right. That's what they see. So that's why there needs to be a change in both perspectives. It's like the recycling industry in Australia as a whole needs a massive PR campaign. There needs to be a huge change because people are savvy. Consumers are getting more and more savvy and they want to know exactly what happens with their waste. They want to know where it goes. They want to know exactly what happens to it. And then they will make the behaviour change. Because then they can see that it is going to make a difference.
Right. Okay. And that's interesting. Cool. I'm thinking about the bins I drag out every 2 weeks. The recycling one is completely full to the lid. The red one that has rubbish in it usually has 1 bag in it every 2 weeks, which I think is pretty reasonable. But again, I wheel it out and go, I hope that's being dealt with. I'm still not sure. I mean, I keep doing it because I want to feel good about what I'm doing at least, but I'm not sure that it's actually having the impact. Where does BRAD fit into all this? And remind me the acronym again.
The Banish Recycling and Disposal Program. So the reason why it's called BRAD is because we want to help your rubbish from going to the wrong pit. So you give it to the right Brad Pitt, which is Banish's pit.
Ah, Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even get that bit. That's amazing.
Very clever.
That's very clever. You need to get some sponsorship going.
If Brad Pitt wants to talk about the program, I will be more than happy to oblige. More than happy to.
Just go up to his photo and until his lawyer's got
Exactly. So the reason why I launched it was it wasn't meant to be this big of a thing. It wasn't meant to take off like it has. It was purely the fact that as a business, I wanted a way to give back to the community. And so many businesses we see do kind of 1% for the planet, or they might plant a tree every time you place an order or something like that. And I wanted to do more. And I was going, well, as the target consumer, I had practiced what I preached and I had reduced so much of my waste, but still each month I was throwing out different items like blister packs, like makeup products, like the single-use cutlery that I was consuming even when I didn't want to, things like that. And I thought, well, why don't I provide this community with the opportunity to recycle those items? That was what it was meant to be. It was meant to be small little service that the Banish community could use and utilize, and then in turn I would incentivize them and we'd provide them with a $15 voucher to spend in-store at Banish. So the thinking was, send us your plastic toothbrushes and your plastic shampoo bottles, and then with that $15 voucher you could buy bamboo toothbrushes and you could buy shampoo bars. The issue is it's taken off and gone absolutely bananas.
Good.
We just turned 1 and we've now recycled 3 tons of waste. So about 45,000 pieces of plastic. in the last year from almost 4,000 different households.
Practically speaking, what's happening? People are mailing you their old toothbrushes.
Literally, that is what's happening. People get together a shoebox, they pop in all of their Brad rubbish, so these items that they couldn't recycle in their curbside bin, and they post it back to us. We receive it, we open it up, we kind of distribute everything into the different waste streams, and then we recycle them with Australian recycling facilities.
And you have like the line of sight so you know that it actually did. Is there stuff where you go, these 4 things actually don't have a home, and that feedback loop comes back?
So we are able to then educate people and say, like, look, we actually cannot recycle X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of like what you were saying with the bin. We do get people who send us things kind of going, well, I think that they could probably recycle it. And you have to go, no, we're not actually magicians. We can't decide to recycle something just because you've sent it to us. But I think it's been a really amazing learning curve for us as a business, because it's kind of changed our model. Rather than being just an e-commerce store and an education platform, we've got this recycling service. The quantity that we're receiving each month means that we're giving out a lot of $15 vouchers, but also the reason why you can't recycle things like plastic toothbrushes and your blister packs in your curbside recycling bin is there isn't a very high resale value for these items. So local councils, they don't want them in the recycling bin because they can't monetize that waste stream.
Yeah, it's a cost to them rather than a way.
Exactly. So that's what the cost is now, falls on me, on Banish.
So I'm going to flip this a little bit just to make sure and play it back to you. So to encourage people to shop more sustainably, you have a sustainable shop, probably the wrong word for it, but a shop where people can buy stuff that's more aligned to their values. To encourage them to invest, to be there and to be spending money there that they would have spent elsewhere, you say, give me the thing that you're not able to get done elsewhere and we'll give you an incentive to shop there. And essentially that's a way to get them incentivized to further use the shop. But it's also then a way to, I guess in some respects, you still have a margin which can fund doing the work that you're doing to actually give these products that should be recycled home that they would have otherwise not had.
Yes.
Have I got that?
So, yeah, that's exactly right. So, like you would have to pay to carbon offset sales or pay to plant trees, we spend that money on the recycling program.
So, yeah.
The only issue is when people don't spend their voucher, for example, with us. If they send us 10 kilos worth of waste that somehow they have accumulated, which would possibly be from their office or their school or their small business, and then send it to us. So that's the issue. So then it comes down to us educating people to kind of, I'm on the phone all day with people kind of saying, this is great. My pharmacy is going to send you all of the blister packs that we create in a week so you can recycle them. And I kind of have to say, that's amazing, but you're not going to spend enough money on Banish for us to actually make money from this. So you're just costing
for us to.
Yeah, you're just costing our business a lot of money. And when you kind of say this is how much it'll cost, they all of a sudden don't want to do it. So that's the issue, is there has to be also an education perspective around the fact that the recycling industry works in an economic way. And it's not just the fact, like, this program is hugely expensive. It's not just that we're doing a great thing and I can go to bed at nights thinking that 3 tons of plastic has gone out, is not in the oceans anymore. It's also the finances behind it is significant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm always interested in, and we're seeing this in a few places, and that's sort of why I asked the questions about recycling before, I feel like we still haven't cracked the nut on recycling, and that will mean a number of things, right? It won't just mean the actual act of turning a toothbrush into a reusable product, but the economic kind of logistical system that enables the person with a toothbrush to get it to the person who will turn it into something of value. And a critical part of that value chain is providing someone with enough incentive to get you the thing so that you can then get it to the right place, which is obviously the nut you're trying to crack. In light of that, are we part? Let's go back to the razor example for a second. I don't know how you create a toothbrush that will last for 50 years and ends up in someone's will, or who would want that in. But is the real solution to a lot of these problems to get things that don't need to be recycled?
Yes. At the end, and that's the thing at the end of the day is that we don't want to be recycling. Like your recycling bin shouldn't be full. Your recycling bin should be like empty because you shouldn't be consuming things that need to be recycled. You should be consuming things that that don't have any kind of waste whatsoever. Yeah. So that's also exactly. So that's also the messaging is whilst it can make you feel like you've done the right thing because you are sending off your recycling and you've now kind of shifted the blame onto somebody else and it's somebody else's problem now. That's actually not the solution. So now I'm kind of looking at the people who are sending us boxes each month going, hang on, there needs to be a bit of a change in behavior here because we can't just make you feel good about the fact that you use this much plastic just because you can recycle it.
Yeah. And that's always a lot of what I sort of come back to in having some of these conversations around being sustainable is ultimately it's about you've got to kind of start with consuming less. And that doesn't mean having less things, but it means having things that can be reused because durability beats out disposability every day of the week when it comes to sustainability from what I can tell. Obviously, there's some caveats around that. If you have something that's durable, that's made in a terrible, terrible way that causes other environmental problems, sure, carve that out. But in terms of two products that are otherwise having the same environmental impact, the one that will last 10 years as opposed to 1 year, even with recycling, it's going to be a less, expensive product from a sustainability perspective. Fascinating. And so you talked about the BRAD program. You said that program's been running for a year?
Yes. That's right.
And talk me through a little bit about you talked a little bit about some of the challenges, but if you wanted to take it from 1 ton to 10 tons to 100 tons, how do we, what's the thing that's holding this back for you?
Well, firstly, it was never meant to get this big. That was one thing. It was never meant to hit 3 tons. Like we had no goals or targets. So we're just trying at the moment, working backwards almost, like it's like Band-Aids plugging a hole. But funding is the biggest issue. It's the fact that as a small business, I'm now a part of the Australian recycling industry paying for people's waste to be recycled, which is something that individuals pay for in their council rates. And now it's kind of this thing that I'm technically funding. So that's the first issue. And it also it's a design flaw. The fact that these products need to be recycled in specialized facilities is an issue. They should be able to be, if they're an item that has to be packaged in something, then it should be able to be curbside recyclable. We're seeing a lot of brands coming out now and partnering with different organizations to kind of create recycling programs for their products. And it's going, well, hang on, you're fixing the end solution. What happens at the top of the chain? Why aren't you changing that? Why are you just kind of fixing or not even fixing, it's kind of like making a pretty picture at the bottom of the chain. Why aren't you changing the top? So I think that's also the issue is that ultimately I would love for the program not to exist because everything can be recycled more simply for people in their own local areas. But a program like this doesn't exist anywhere in Australia, which is the reason why I created it, was because there is waste that people don't want to send to landfill ultimately, but they don't have the quantities to hit kind of, 50 kilos worth of HDPE, oh my gosh, plastic.
It's one of the 7 types of plastic, right?
Yeah, the number 2 plastic, to send it to a facility for them to turn it into something like garden beds or pots or something like that. So it's totally inaccessible to individuals. But for groups, it starts to become more accessible. And then when you get bigger and bigger, then you've got that bargaining power because you've got the larger quantities.
Yeah. And I'm sure with a lot of these things, economies of scale are a massive part of it. You're like in anything, right? As soon as you get some degree of scale, you have leverage, you have, your costs become lower, the whole thing tends to work. You can sometimes generate some form of network effect. It means a $15 voucher might go to $5 voucher. I've got a couple of related points. I want to understand also how you got to working on. Hopefully, they're not sending this to your home, are they?
No. Very at the start, they were sending it to a post box, and then we were recycling it in my backyard. That was how grassroots it was, because, as I said, it wasn't meant to get this big. It wasn't meant to be hundreds of people and the post office calling me daily saying, Lottie, come quickly. You've filled up our whole back area. We don't have enough space to accept other parcels from people. Come get your rubbish.
Yeah, I was going to say, at some point they go, what's in all these boxes? Oh, it's rubbish.
Literally, I'd say to them, and they'd be really careful with them and said, oh, just don't worry, just throw it on the ground. It's just rubbish. And they kind of look at me going, what? What is going on?
Getting back to your PR point, you probably do need to brand it. It's highly valuable, recyclable material.
Exactly. So, that's initially how it was starting. It was initially starting with just me doing it. And then I had to our girlfriend and I used to go for a walk at lunchtime and I'd say to her, look, we can't walk today, but can you come and sort some rubbish in my backyard? And she'd go, oh, fine, whatever. And then it kind of grew to the fact that we had volunteers and then we were having volunteering days because the people then understand how it works. They understand recycling more when they're seeing these large quantities, seeing how it's sorted, how it's then turned into items. So that's kind of how it's working. But again, I'm very fortunate that these people want to volunteer their time because otherwise it wouldn't be a program that could financially work because it costs money. It doesn't make money.
Yeah. And the acquiring of it and the actual physical labour that you're doing on it. How did you arrive in doing all of this?
I don't actually know.
The arc of the story that lands you in your backyard sorting plastic with your friends who thought they were going on a walk.
Yeah, look, the whole Brad program, it was just, as I said before, it was just a personal need to recycle these items that I couldn't find any other recycling solutions for. So that's why I just thought, well, I think other people in the community will want to participate. And in the first month that we did it, we had 6 people send us their rubbish. And now we get over 600 in a month. And so that's kind of it. Just, I think, it snowballed. There's no I unfortunately wasn't a child that sat there at the bins sorting them. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. It's just happened.
And then in terms of the, Banish generally, how, you talk right up front about, I guess, being in journalism land and struggling for yourself to do this. But it sounds like you were scratching an itch further down from there. What's in you that's driven you to come out of a corporate normal job and be doing this?
Yeah. I was in corporate life for about 5 or 6 years, so not really that long.
Sure.
Banish was probably, I think it's my 4th or 5th business.
Okay.
So, and that when I started that, I think I started Banish when I was 23 or 24. So entrepreneurship has always really been something that's been there in the background. I just never really thought that I would see it as a career. I don't know why. I just went down the traditional path, followed everybody else, went to university, got the corporate job. But I remember one of my first bosses saying to me at kind of the age of 17, oh no, you'll just have your own business. Why are you even going to uni? That's just a waste of time.
Did they tell you why they said that?
I just think she saw it from the get-go, was that I was constantly fixing problems, constantly thinking of different ways of doing things.
Unhappy with the state of the world and thought, well, I can fix it.
Exactly. There's always a problem to fix. But yeah, in terms of sustainability, I am not great. I'm not perfect at it. I haven't always lived like this. I haven't been somebody who has never flown around the world. I've done that. I've consumed plastic. I've done that. I've done it all. It's probably just my love for the environment and the love for people. And I think when I first of all saw and did my research into what is happening with the environment and then saw the disconnect between how people were feeling, it was a solution that I was like, well, it just makes sense. People need to understand what's happening, but they also need to be empowered and inspired to do more. And that's where I came in and was like, well, I could do that.
Yeah. And then just on that, on that journey, what skills did you bring into it, but what have you had to kind of learn along the way to kind of be able to solve or improve on the situation that you still find?
Yeah, so I think the journalism definitely has helped because it's breaking down complex issues and topics into digestible information for consumers. Right. From a business perspective, I didn't do any kind of business degree. I haven't done anything like that at university, or everything is Mr. Google teaching me how to do everything and kind of, okay, like what is I don't know, I'd be Googling like MOQ. What does that mean? Like I was minimum order quantity. There you go. Learn something new every day. So that has been a huge learning curve for me. And every day I'm still learning. I feel like because I as well didn't study sustainability, I've never studied to be an environmental engineer or anything to do with sustainability. Everything is learned. So it's a pretty unique situation to call yourself a sustainability expert without having a degree. So that's another kind of thing.
I was just going to say that, like, to call yourself a sustainability expert is probably similar to people sticking the eco-friendly label on the front. Anyone can do it. Anyone can say it. No one's really got any authority to be doing so. Just probably one last question for me. Just in terms of not necessarily the Brad program specifically, or it could be that, in terms of like what is kind of the next major hill that you're trying to cover, like, and trying to get over, or, you know, the next big milestone that you're trying to hit, and what's sort of holding you back from that? I'm really always keen to understand that in case there's someone who is listening who can help you with that.
Yeah, so the Brad program is an absolute drain. It's a beast. It takes time, energy, money, everything. Yeah. So it really pulls me away from growing Banish as a business. Right. And growing Banish as a business is purely just getting it out there to more people. We've got the product base of over, I think it's 500 products from 50 suppliers, but there's also more categories that we want to go into, like babies and kids and, I don't know, makeup. There's all of these different areas we want to expand into, but I'm a perfectionist in the sense that I don't want to do anything until I've got exactly the right brands, exactly the right know-how, exactly the right kind of infrastructure to get there. And at the moment, we're growing too quickly, which is it's a good problem to have, but it means that there's growing pains left, right, and centre because everything is expanding at a really fast rate.
Okay, and so, but I'm going to try and get you to be specific here. If there was a specific challenge that you're trying to solve right now, it's solve this Brad problem. Yeah. It's solve how to do this recycling of these materials that otherwise won't be recycled without completely blowing up the business. That might be an operational solve or an economic solve. Could be anything that makes it a self-sustaining thing rather than a drain, you know, and a thing that's taking you away from building it more broadly.
Exactly. It's as well, it's making it a economically sustainable part of the business, because right now it's not.
It's something we have to do. And your friends on their walks.
Yes, no, they've definitely passed that off now. It's just the amazing volunteers who are doing that.
Amazing. Lottie Dalziel, I'm going to get that right at the end. Amazing chatting to you. And I really hope that you guys landed. And I reckon you should just co-op the Brad Pitt thing. You should do that. Just beg for forgiveness. Don't ask for permission.
Great. Perfect. Thanks for having me, Vincent.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to speaking to you again.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.